This is the audio version of Be Free Ministries' article on the soul. In the original Greek text of the Bible, the word psyche was translated to soul and life in English. In the New Testament, it is translated 58 times as soul and 40 times as life. As an example, you can see in Matthew chapter 16 verse 25, psyche is translated as life. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. And the following verse, Matthew chapter 16 verse 25, translates psyche as soul. For what profit is to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? We can look at several verses here which define the soul, the principle of life. But Paul went down, fell on him, and embracing him said, "Do not trouble yourself, for his life is in him." Acts chapter 20 verse 10. Life, soul. A living being, and so it is written, the first man Adam was made a living soul, the last Adam was made a quickening spirit. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 45. A human individual. Then those who gladly received his word were baptized, and that day about 3,000 souls were added to them. Acts chapter 2 verse 41. The immaterial soul. And do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Matthew chapter 10 verse 28. The inner self. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many good laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. Luke chapter 12 verse 19. The soul is the unseen and immaterial part of man, and is the link between the spirit and the body. It is the mental and emotional part of us, and people also refer to it as a personality. In Matthew chapter 10 verse 28, Jesus tells us about the soul and how it is distinct from the body. And do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. In Hebrews chapter 4 verse 12, we can see the soul and spirit are both separate. For the word of God is living and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the division of soul and spirit and of joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. We can also see in Psalm chapter 51 verse 6 that the inward parts of our being are the parts of our soul, and the hidden part is our spirit. Behold, you desire truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part you will make me to know wisdom. Now we can look at the makeup of the soul by studying the following verses. The soul is made up of the mind, the will, and the emotion. Proverbs chapter 2 verse 10 tells us that the mind is a part of the soul as knowledge occurs and exists in the mind. When wisdom enters your heart, and knowledge is pleasant to your soul. Knowledge and wisdom are both associated with the soul, as we can see in Proverbs chapter 24 verse 14. So shall the knowledge of wisdom be to your soul, Psalm 139 verse 14 says. And that my soul knows very well. This further proves that the mind must be part of the soul, as knowing occurs and exists in the mind. The soul needs knowledge. Also, it is not good for a soul to be without knowledge. Proverbs chapter 19 verse 2. The soul remembers things, as we can see in Lamentations chapter 3 verse 20. My soul remembers them well. The soul considers and counsels, Psalm chapter 13 verse 2 says. How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? From these scriptures we can understand that the mind is the part of the soul which knows, remembers, and considers. Part of the soul is the will. Choosing and refusing are both decisions and functions of the will, as we can see in Job chapter 7 verse 15. So that my soul chooses, and Job chapter 6 verse 7 says, my soul refuses to touch them. Just as our minds are used to think, in 1 Chronicles chapter 22 verse 19, we can see that we set our soul to seek. Now set your heart and your soul to seek the Lord, your God. This is to make a decision, and knowing that the soul makes a decision also proves that the will is a part of the soul. Numbers chapter 30 verse 2 also shows us that the soul is used to make a decision when it refers to binding by making a decision to commit ourselves to the Lord. If a man makes a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to bind himself by some agreement, part of the soul is emotion, which includes love, hatred, joy, grief, and desire. 1 Samuel chapter 18 verse 1 shows us that love as an emotion is part of the soul. The soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Hatred as an emotion is part of the soul. Whoever climbs up by way of the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul. 2 Samuel chapter 5 verse 8. Their soul abhorred all manner of food. Psalm chapter 107 verse 18. Joy as an emotion is part of the soul. My soul shall be joyful in my God. Isaiah chapter 61 verse 10. Desire as an emotion is part of the soul, and you shall spend that money for whatever your heart desires, for oxen or sheep, for wine or similar drink, for whatever your heart desires, you shall eat there before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 26. Grief as an emotion is part of the soul, and his soul could no longer endure the misery of Israel. Judges chapter 10 verse 16. So as we can see from the verses above, the soul is the unseen and immaterial part of man, and three parts make up all the functions of the soul: the mind as the principal and leading part, followed by the will and the emotion. After our spirit is regenerated at salvation, we receive and contact the Lord with our spirit, and we reflect and express him with our transformed soul.